you know where your roster is right now? Because the transfer portal opened yesterday. So a lot of pieces moving, shaking, a lot of buzz right now coming out of the portal. Oh, by the way, since we were last on the air together, a little thing called the college football playoff rankings came out. We'll give you our thoughts on that. Welcome into the hard count, baby. There is no time like the present to be dialed into college football because we got a lot going on. Want y'all a part of this. Make sure you're subscribed. It is Tuesday, December 10th. Already December 10th. I mean, 2 weeks away from Christmas, but who's counting? 2024, last one on the face of the planet. This is going to be a very quarterback-centric show today. We got takes on the quarterbacks in the college football playoff and kind of ranking where we trust some of those cats. We got takes on where we think some of these quarterbacks in the transfer portal maybe could be headed. Going to call our shot a little bit there. And then also, I want us to talk about the impact, potentially, of what a portal quarterback can be for you. All right, I want to start right there. Again, glad to have y'all here. If you're new to the show, welcome. It's ball, nothing but ball. Every single day, all year round, right here. Make sure you are dialed in, all right? So let's start here. Right now, if you are portal shopping for a quarterback, you've got something dangerous and something valuable. It's called hope, right? Because you look at this college football playoff field, of these 12 teams, count them up, 6 have transfer portal guys at the helm. I'm including Texas in that equation because Quinn Ewers, now remember, transferred from Ohio State to Texas before taking over the show in Austin. So you're thinking, hey, man, if we get the right guy in the portal, maybe, just maybe, we could find ourselves in that 12-team dance next year. And that's not an unreasonable thought. I think that's totally a fair way to look at this. But what I would say is there's a couple of disclaimers tied to that. The first is we're going to talk about the guys in the portal right now, but I think this crop, compared to previous year's crop, there's one individual who is actually not yet even in the portal. We're all speculating right now, and this is fair to speculate because it's been talked about openly. I think John Mateer, if he were to jump into the portal, again, he's not in there right now, Washington State quarterback, if he were to jump in the portal, that is the one big fish that I would circle and say, okay, that's the guy that takes us from, I don't know, a 7-win team to like a 10, 11-win team. I think he's that good. Looking at his numbers, I mean, total of 44 touchdowns on the year, both running and passing, over or right around, I should say, in the neighborhood of 4,000 yards on the year. Again, running and passing combined there. Dude's special. Dude is very special. So if he jumps in the portal now, that is the guy that I think is your Cam Ward caliber. We'll see what Will Howard ends up being in this playoff run, but like that is the big fish that I am circling if he does in fact jump in the portal. Now, the school to watch, if he does jump in the portal, for all accounts, is Oklahoma, because his offensive coordinator just took the offensive coordinator job in Norman. So that's a hypothetical. We'll see if he actually does that. But the reason I say that, with this crop, I don't know there's a ton of game changers that I'm looking at just off the jump. Like, I love a lot of these guys. We'll talk about them here in a minute in terms of potential landing spots. But we need to remember, this is still the greatest team sport on the face of the planet. Like, you still got to have 10 other dudes on offense doing their job, and maybe as important, 11 other dudes on the defensive side of the football doing their job. Because when Cam Ward went to Miami, I think we all pretty much felt like that was a home run when he transferred out of Pullman last year. We all felt like Miami got a dude. We felt like that was going to change their operation out there. Your boy said, I think they're going to win the ACC and big college football playoff team. Now, Cam Ward, just so we're all on the same page, he played at an ACC championship caliber level this year. He played at a college football playoff caliber level this year. However, Miami's getting ready for the Pop-Tart Bowl. And he took them from 7 wins to 10 wins. But what was the issue? The defense couldn't stop a nosebleed. That's not Cam Ward's fault. If you're a Miami fan, it's not your fault for being optimistic. Everything you believed about Cam Ward ended up being true. He was an absolute dude. He had arguably the best season in Miami Hurricane history when it comes to the quarterback position. However, when we talk about portal quarterbacks, what is so crucial? Same thing that's crucial in every discussion in life. Context, fit, scheme, all those things. That matters when you talk about a portal quarterback, because when we look at Cam Ward, mentioning the defense is obviously the first part of that. Let's go ahead and look at maybe a lack of success story. I don't want to dunk on the guy, but DJ Uiagalelei. You felt like you got your guy when you landed him via the portal at Florida State. You thought, okay, hey, Mike Norvell, quarterback whisperer. I said it myself, like this is the best external circumstances, preseason at least, that we've seen for DJ Uiagalelei. Better play caller, better weapons. None of that ended up being true. So while it's fair to tie your hope in large part to what you can get via the portal at quarterback, I don't think that should be your end-all, be-all. So yes, if John Mateer jumps in the portal and he does go to Oklahoma and he ends up being a guy in Norman and they have a great season, I think that's totally fair to have higher expectations. But understand now, the context and the fit is as crucial as anything else. Like Riley Leonard at Notre Dame is a great example of this. He's not lighting the world on fire statistically. He's not going to be in New York for the Heisman Trophy ceremony. He's not putting up Cam Ward numbers, but guess what? The fit for him with that defense on the other side of the football, with Jeremiah Love next to him, with those freak show tight ends they have out there, with Mike Denbrock calling the system for him, what they ask him to do, he fits perfectly into. So when he got to South Bend, there was excitement about what he could bring to the table, but there was, I think, even more excitement about how he could fit into that system and how he could ultimately be that missing puzzle piece. So all that's to say, it's portal season. Get fired up if you are in the market for a portal quarterback. There's a lot of good ones out there, but I would pay as much, if not maybe more attention to what you have around those guys when it comes to the coaching staff, when it comes to the defense, the weapons, all that is equally, if not more impactful than landing your guy via the portal. But obviously, we're going to monitor that very closely and keep a very watchful eye on what one John Mateer ends up doing at Washington State. Again, as of right now, he is not currently in the transfer portal. His coach is talking about it, saying we think we've made a fair offer for him when it comes to NIL. I don't know that it will be a money-motivated situation for him, per Pete Nakos here at On 3. A lot going into that one, a lot going on in the transfer portal in general. Make sure to subscribe, make sure you're dialed in right here. So I want to make sure y'all know here before we move forward, the hard count brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks. Now we are circling the wagons for just a nasty college football playoff run. We'll have a lot of plays for you there. If you want to tail us on our plays, the best way to do that, using code HARDCOUNT now, when you play with the $5 lineup, you get $50 in promo funds. So I know a lot of us now, Christmas right around the corner, gotta pay for gifts somehow. The best way to pay is to play, is what I'm going to go ahead and say right there. It rhymed, but it is what it is. Make sure you're dialed in. Code HARDCOUNT. $5 in lineups, $50 in promo funds. Appreciate y'all. And appreciate Prize Picks for bringing y'all the show today. So I mentioned John Mateer. We're going to talk about him a little bit here in this next segment, but it's that time of year, man. The portal is open. We're starting to get a little bit more intel, a little bit more buzz. Again, if you're not yet following the On3 Transfer Portal account on all the social media platforms, do that. Also, follow the dude who pretty much owns portal coverage and Pete Nakos on the social platforms as well. But right now, we're going to go ahead and call our own shots when it comes to where some of these portal quarterbacks could ultimately end up. Now, full disclaimer, these things change quick, fast, in a hurry. This is not necessarily intel-based. This is some of us playing matchmaker. Hey, where's the fit? Where would we like to see this guy at? So one guy that I think is maybe the most clear cut for where he could end up next is Jackson Arnold. There's currently a pick out there from our very own Pete Nakos at On3, so there is some intel here baked in from what I can tell. Jackson Arnold is predicted to end up Mississippi State. And honestly, this makes all the sense in the world. If I'm Jackson Arnold and I just got benched at Oklahoma and then got thrown back into the fire and we beat Alabama and vibes are amazing after that, I'm sure, but I want to go somewhere after the tumultuous year I had in Norman. I want to go somewhere where I know I'm believed in, where I know where I'm going, somewhere where someone understands my skill set, understands what I'm capable of. And that is Jeff Lebby. Because remember now, Jackson Arnold, when he committed to Oklahoma, committed to Jeff Lebby as the OC over there. Now, Jeff Lebby, currently the Mississippi State offensive coordinator. So these dots aren't necessarily all that difficult to connect. Jackson Arnold, I think, is a very fascinating portal case because the guy comes out of high school, 5-star plus kind of quarterback. Everyone's talking about how he's the next great one in Norman. And then again, he has that game against Tennessee, and there was probably some ramp up to that where he ends up getting benched. And the thing that I'm so impressed about with Jackson Arnold, the thing that honestly keeps me holding my stock with him, a couple of facets to it, but the one thing that you can't coach is mental toughness. Jackson Arnold, based on how he responded after getting benched and being thrown back into the games this season and going out and beating Alabama, to be able to respond after having a very, very public failure and being a guy that had so much hype and then falling so far and being able to respond, that told me a lot about how Jackson Arnold is wired. And the physical parts, I think, are still very much so unknown. Everyone wants to point to, the bad decisions, the this, the that. It's dude, look at the external circumstances Jackson Arnold was dealing with. Again, what we just said a second ago, your portal quarterback impact and what they end up doing for you. Look at what they have around them. Jackson Arnold walking in there as the guy this year in Norman. He didn't transfer in, obviously, but being the guy in Norman this year. Offensive line, brand new. That's going to hurt you in any conference you're in. It's probably the least ideal in the SEC, where you got freak show defensive linemen pretty much at every turn. The strong point of this Oklahoma offense was supposed to be the skill players in the perimeter. That was an infirmary every single week. It was like, oh, who's out this week for Oklahoma at receiver? Pretty much everybody. So you take that away. Okay, you're playing even more left-handed. You pile on top of that, you had not one but two different offensive coordinators this year in Norman. That doesn't help a quarterback. Oh, by the way, either way you slice it, it was a new offensive coordinator, not the guy you committed to, because you committed to Jeff Lebby. There's a lot of pieces here that make, I think, what Jackson Arnold was dealing with in Norman very difficult. And for that reason, I don't know that I'm buying the idea that the guy just can't play football. So Jackson Arnold, I think he goes to Mississippi State, and I would be very slow to just write him off and say, it's not going to work. One more thing I'll say, the Mississippi State scheme with how they're trying to attack defenses in the SEC, one of the things I liked about Jeff Lebby when they made that hire, it's a very zig when others zag kind of approach. Because in the SEC, we talked about the trenches, right? Like the defensive line play week in and week out, it's elite, man. There's a reason the NFL goes to the SEC for defensive linemen along with a lot of other positions. Like there's a reason why they go there. There's a lot of just freak shows. So if you're Mississippi State and you're maybe not at the level of a Georgia, Alabama, Texas, so on and so forth, what do you have to do? You have to find a way to scheme around that, to minimize the maybe gap that you have in the trenches. And so the air raid attack the air raid, I guess, esque attack, the wide splits attack of Jeff Lebby, I'm not so sure that approach won't eventually be successful if they get the right weapons for a Jackson Arnold if he ends up in Stark Vegas. Because honestly, y'all, like, you know who else has made a killing doing this? Josh Heupel. Tennessee, I mean, they're essentially doing what Jeff Lebby did or is trying to do right now at Mississippi State, and they're doing it at a high level. So obviously you have to eventually get the price of admission in the trenches, and Tennessee has done that. But Mississippi State, you get the right quarterback, get the right weapons, you can bridge the gap that way. I'll say that much. So to call our shot here, Jackson Arnold to Stark Vegas, we feel pretty confident about that one. Now here's one that I don't want us to overthink. Caden Salter. He was with Hugh Freeze at Liberty. He had his best collegiate season at Liberty. Under Hugh Freeze, like, where's Hugh Freeze right now? Auburn. What does Auburn need? Portal quarterback. That to me feels pretty cut and dry. Now, I'm not going to say there's not other schools in the mix because obviously there are for Caden Salter. Get a membership over at on3.com to get all the intel there. But like for me, I'm just looking at this from a black and white perspective. If I'm Caden Salter, I want to go somewhere where I know that I can hit the ground running. Like obviously you can go other places and learn the playbook and have success, obviously, but like why not just cut to the heart of the issue and go somewhere where you know the scheme, you know the coach, you know the system, and you had success in the system? Like, I'm looking at this thing, and it feels pretty straightforward to me. So, Caden Salter, again, I have been, I think, semi-infamously higher on than maybe some other folks across the industry. I just think the production, I think the experience, I think what he's been able to do at Liberty, that to me gives me a lot of confidence. Also, he started his career at Tennessee for a very, very brief stint. It's not like Caden Salter doesn't have Power 4 kind of God-given gifts. He does. Like that's the reason why he was at Tennessee out of high school. So Caden Salter to Auburn would be the shot that I would call. It's worth noting there is currently a pick out there for Ashton Daniels to end up at Auburn as well. That does not deter me from saying I think Caden Salter ends up at Auburn. Just full transparency. I think they'll take more than one quarterback. Miller Moss from USC. He's got 1 year. Who has been the 1 year savant when it comes to portal quarterbacks? Who has one of the best track records in the whole sport? I'm looking at Jeff Brom and the Louisville Cardinals. All right. You bring in Jack Plummer, 1 year, has success, currently on NFL roster. Tyler Shuck hasn't been able to stay healthy. He gets a 7th year of eligibility. He's bounced around, goes to Louisville, has success. We'll see what his NFL prospects are, but I feel like they're a lot better than they were before he got to Louisville. There's a portal quarterback blueprint there. Miller Moss has 1 year to go after it. I love that fit. It sounds like there is some equal there is some equal interest on both sides of the thing from Miller Moss and from the Louisville Cardinals. Louisville as an offense is going to throw the ball around. Like I think if you're Miller Moss too, speaking of what you want to get out of the Louisville experience, obviously you want to go win football games, you want to go and have a tremendous finish to your college career, but like I think you also probably want to help your draft stock. Louisville last season averaged 8.1 yards a pass. Translation, they will air it out. They will give you a chance to strut your stuff for the NFL. So I think Miller Moss also with his time at USC, I don't know that it was a Miller Moss problem, to be real with y'all. Like, did he have the cleanest season of all time? No. Were there other issues at USC as well? I fully believe that. I think that Miller Moss could end up somewhere like Louisville and have a lot of success. That's one portal fit that I actually really, really love if it ends up going that way. So Miller Moss to Louisville is our portal quarterback prediction as it stands for the former USC signal caller. Now, Connor Wegman's an interesting one. I've said before, from a fit perspective, I don't love the SEC for him. I would love to see him end up somewhere like a Syracuse. I don't know how much mutual interest there is there. I think Missouri is going to be the prediction for me with Connor Wegman. And there's a couple of pieces to this. I think Connor Wegman would probably like to stay in the SEC. I don't think that's a stretch. Again, I don't know this. I haven't talked to him. This is not intel-based. I'm just saying if I'm a quarterback at the collegiate level, I want to be in the best conference possible to help my NFL draft stock. The SEC is pretty much where the NFL looks. Obviously, there's other ballers all over the country, other conferences. The SEC, there's a reason why they have the most draft picks, all right? So I think staying in the SEC has got to be attractive. But also, there's something to, I think, being benched and then going somewhere else and the demeanor of that head coach. Like, I think Eli Drinkwitz is exactly the coach I'd want to play for if I'm transferring somewhere else after a situation where maybe I went not where I wasn't believed in, but where I had a situation where, again, kind of a public failure, a lot of hype going into the year. Eli Drinkwitz doesn't care, man. Like you talk about teams taking on the persona of their head coach. From what I can tell, the persona of Eli Drinkwitz is like, I'm going to do my thing. We're going to ball out. We don't care what you think about it. It's brash. It's confident. Like, if I'm rebounding from a tough situation like a Connor Wegman at A&M, like, I would love that for him to end up at Missouri. So in that way, I think the juice, the confidence, the scheme, they probably need a portal quarterback if you're Missouri. Sounds like there's some smoke there. I think Connor Wegman ends up at Missouri. Thomas Castellanos is transferring from Boston College. The school that I would predict him to end up at is Florida State. Now, this is kind of a classic dot connection situation. Gus Malzahn was at UCF when Thomas Castellanos was at UCF. If you're a Florida State fan, you might read the headline and say, Boston College quarterback predicted to end up at Florida State. And you're like, man, is that really the direction we're going? But then you kind of have your memory jogged. You say, wait a second. Is that Castellanos cat? That dude that tore us up 2 years in a row last year for ultimately Boston College beating us when early on in the year we thought we were one of those teams competing for a college football playoff. He is a dude. All right, Thomas Castellanos can play the position, and I love the fit from a schematic perspective. Gus Malzahn, what do you know about him? Quarterback run game, does well with the dual threat guys. UCF a year ago was a 60% run the football team. I'm not telling you Thomas Castellanos can't throw the ball, but I am telling you with a diverse run game, with the hurry-up kind of look, with the spread look, I think he fits perfectly for Gus Malzahn at Florida State. And with him being the new OC out there, that'd be my prediction for where he would end up. One more guy that I want us to talk about here, and we already mentioned this in a previous segment, John Mateer, the big fish out there. He is not in the portal. Hear me clearly. He is not in the portal. There is speculation from everyone and their mama that he could end up in there. If he does jump in there, look at Oklahoma. His OC is there. That's where I would predict him to end up if he does, in fact, jump in there. Now, this is not a prediction, but just a name that I feel like we have to touch on. Darian Mensah might be the best quarterback in the portal currently from Tulane. He's taken a visit to Duke. I'm not so sure he ends up at Duke. What I would watch here is what happens with some of these guys at different SEC schools and if they end up declaring for the draft. Like, I think Garrett Nussmeier, just if it's me, I would hope he comes back if I'm an LSU fan. If he doesn't, LSU might need a quarterback. Same situation at Alabama. Jalen Milroe. I think he actually has one more year. Don't quote me on that. But Jalen Milroe, if he goes to the league, I know you got Austin Mack still there. Alabama might not be a horrific fit for Darian Mensah. Georgia, I'm curious to see what Georgia does in the portal here. They have been a school that's popped up with a Jackson Arnold. Again, I don't think that he's going there. So just the fact that Georgia's even in the portal quarterback market is a little bit intriguing. So just keep an eye on Darian Mensah. Keep an eye on the SEC schools. I'm not making a pick there necessarily. Just want us to talk through some fits and some updates as it pertains to him and our feel on that whole situation. So this may not be the last time we do this. We may do a portal quarterback prediction 2.0 for you. We did that last year, and y'all responded tremendously. Our philosophy on this show is like, hey, new information, new opinion. So as we get more information, our opinion could change, but we feel pretty good calling our shot as of today on Tuesday, December 10th, 2024. Appreciate everybody tuned in live, man. Great crowd. Glad to have y'all here. College football does not stop. Some of your friends are saying, wait a second, the regular season's over. You're still dialed in? Yeah, because the portal's open. Yeah, because we got the college football playoff around the corner. So don't listen to your friends trying to tell you that the season's over. The season is not over. In fact, it is just now resetting. And for a lot of y'all, even if you're not playing in the bowl game, your season is starting in a massive way with the portal because you have a chance to revamp there. Now, speaking of the season resetting, this is going to be the longest season in college football history, ending January 20th in Atlanta. We will be there. It'll be a blast. We haven't had a chance, I don't think. We haven't had a chance since the college football playoff field came out to give you our thoughts on this in a live capacity. Now, if you're subscribed to the channel, we had a reaction video for you. A mere few minutes after that whole situation dropped. So another reason to be subscribed. But for those of y'all that just catch the podcast, just catch the live show, my thoughts on the playoff are a little bit multifaceted, if you will. Because if it's me, I think Alabama, if you put them on the field with SMU and played 100 games, I think Alabama would win 85 to 90 of those games. Just my opinion. However, given what the committee was trying to do, which is put in, a resume and different facets of their logic with the college football playoff bracket, I think they got the teams right. All that's to say, I think SMU over Bama is probably the right call. If you're Alabama, the tough part of this is, you can't lose to Oklahoma. Your conversation to bargain with the committee, you lose a lot of chips when you lose to a 6-6 SEC team. All right? It is the way that it is. Now, a lot of folks now from the Bama crowd are saying, well, it's the conference we play in. We're not going to schedule a tough non-conference then. Conference is definitely tough, no way around it. I don't think Oklahoma's an easy out by any stretch, even though they did have a 6-6 record this year. Anybody can get anybody. That's 100% true. But don't tell me it's a non-conference thing. Because Western Kentucky, USF, Wisconsin, and Mercer is not exactly the gauntlet. Wisconsin obviously is not a slouch, but playing two G5 schools and Mercer, nobody's having an issue with your gauntlet to get into the college football playoff. Okay, so I think to put a bow on that thought, I think within the logic of the college football playoff committee, they got the teams right. However, the seeding for this college football playoff format is absolutely broken, and there's a couple thoughts within that. This season, we'll see how broken it actually is, but you should never be hoping for a lower seed to benefit you in the college football playoff. The best example of this is Oregon. We talked about it on our reaction video. Oregon's the number one seed in this whole deal. They've earned it. Undefeated, beat Ohio State, beat Penn State for the Big Ten championship. They're the top seed in this bracket. Seeding is supposed to benefit you. Seeding is supposed to make your path easier if you're Oregon. So Dan Lanning doesn't care about this, but we'll talk about it on this show. Oregon's path is brutal, man. Oregon, what do you get for being the one seed? The winner of Ohio State and Tennessee. Meanwhile, the team that you just beat in the Big Ten championship game, they have, I would say, the most navigable path of this entire college football playoff bracket. You got SMU in the first round, which they will be, I have to believe, a pretty strong mismatch for that team. And then you play Boise State, the G5 rep. I would much rather have Penn State's path. I'd much rather play Boise State in round 2 than have to play the winner of Tennessee, Ohio State. We saw Ohio State, for all their faults and all their flaws against Michigan, play Oregon to a 1-point game in Eugene. Tennessee, I think, is one of those teams that I would not want to see in the college football playoff based on what they are in the trenches and based on what they are schematically. All that's to say, the seeding for this college football playoff is broken. There's a part of me now that is glad that the season has gone how it's gone so that we can see how broken the seeding really is. So I was talking to Caden Smith about this yesterday as we got ready for the show. If this whole situation with the college football playoff seeding and the buys and the conference champs had been nice and neat and tidy, and you got Arizona State in there at 12-1, you got Oregon undefeated, you got a Georgia there undefeated, we wouldn't have a good gauge for how broken this whole thing really is. And I think when things are broken and we get a chance to see how broken they are, that's a catalyst for us wanting to fix things. And so I say all that to say, as we move into the next iteration of this thing in 2026, I promise you, the seating for this whole deal will be very, very different. The auto bids for this whole thing will be very, very different. I'd be surprised from the Big Ten and the SEC with the cards they hold. I'd be surprised if they don't find a way to bargain for more auto bids for their conference in general. Just my feeling. I don't know if that'll happen. That's, I think, the biggest takeaway with this whole thing. Like Oregon having to play Tennessee or Ohio State after their bye in the college football playoff is just it's absolutely ridiculous. It does not play into what common sense would say about what seeding should ultimately do for you if you're the number one seed. The 6th seed should never be more advantageous than the 1 seed, to put it simply. So, I say all that to get back to this point. These games are still going to be awesome. Like, we have an issue with the college football playoff committee, how it's put together. We have an issue with the bracket. We have an issue with them expanding to 12 teams. Like, I've been on the front line of that. But when they actually play the games, it's going to be a lot of fun. And that's never been something we've ever disputed on this show. Like getting Clemson and Texas in round 1, as bizarre as that is, if you're Texas, again, a team that should be at an advantage as the 5 seed, you got to play the ACC champion Clemson. Like, it's still going to be awesome for us as a viewer. So as much as we have an issue with the logic, I think college football in itself will still be awesome. We're still going to be dialed in. We'll still do a ton of content around it. But I just want us to all be aligned here. The college football playoff, as it is right now, we're not going to have this same format in 2026. I promise you that. I promise. Even if it ends up being a situation where, the seeding works itself out to SMU goes on a run and they end up proving that, hey, this is actually right to have this number of teams in this kind of seeding. The flaws are there. The flaws are absolutely there, and it will be very, very different when we re-rack this thing in 2026. But speaking of the college football playoff, man, I told you it's kind of a quarterback-centric show today. Most important position in the sport. I think it's the most important domino when it comes to your team making the college football playoff. We already talked about that and how it pertains to the portal. But got to thinking about this, man. We've held this take for a long time on this show. In the 12-team format, if you want to win a national championship, you better have a dude at quarterback. You better have a dude you trust at quarterback. Because in this era now, when you get to, let's call it the second round of that college football playoff, you might have an advantage on a talent perspective when you line it up with Penn State and SMU, or when you have, a Boise State and a Penn State or whoever it ends up being. But when you get to those even roster talent matchups, you got to have a guy behind center that can elevate you and win the football game for you when you don't have that massive advantage in the trenches or that massive advantage out wide. So if that's the case now, which quarterbacks do you trust to make the difference for you? We'll talk about it right now. First things first, if you're watching live, make sure you're subscribed. If you're watching this as a one-off clip, make sure you're dialed in. College football playoff is going to be awesome. We're going to enjoy the heck out of every single matchup. As much as we might have an objection to the seating and the committee and all that, it's going to be awesome. So make sure you're locked in. A lot of content coming for you right here on the On3 YouTube page. So I want us to rank our top 5 quarterbacks that we trust going 5 all the way up to 1 when it comes to this college football playoff bracket. Now, at number 5, you could go a lot of different ways here. Like, I almost went with Riley Leonard here. I think you can make a case for Kevin Jennings here. I think, honestly, how you feel about Indiana and Curtis Rourke and the experience factor. To me, there's too many different arguments against every single one of those guys for me to put him at 5. Like Curtis Rourke, as much as I love him and his experience, I cannot unsee that Ohio State game. Kevin Jennings, I have a question about the strength of the roster around Kevin Jennings to be able to trust him to the level I want to trust him at to go make some noise in the college football playoff. Riley Leonard, I love what he's asked to do at Notre Dame, but again, Notre Dame doesn't ask all that much of him. So if Notre Dame's not trusting him to cut it loose, it's hard for us to trust him enough to put him at 5. The quarterback that I'll put at 5 is Will Howard. Now, Will Howard, the pushback on this is, well, JD, the Michigan game is hard to unsee. It absolutely is. There's no way around that. There's a reason why we don't have Will Howard at 1 on these rankings. What I would say is, as much as that Michigan game lives in your mind, I think the Oregon performance should also live in your mind. Now, the thing that people will jump to here is, well, JD, again, he slid at the end of the game. He shouldn't have slid, and that cost Ohio State the game. Totally fair. Again, there's a reason why he's at 5 and not at 1. But I would say, in that game, to me at least, I think Will Howard answered a lot of questions. I think he answered the idea of, hey, can he be a guy to provide enough horsepower for you, to provide enough juice to these weapons, to a Jeremiah Smith, to a Emeka Egbuka, to be able to get you to where you want to go. I think situationally we've seen he can. Now, will he do it consistently? Remains to be seen. But Will Howard has too much around him, has played too much football for me to have him below 5 on this list when it comes to quarterbacks that we trust to make a run in the college football playoff. I'll also say this too. You look at this bracket. I think you're going to need a mobile quarterback to get it done. Just my opinion. Like, you look at the defensive line play you could end up having here in this college football playoff. You line it up again, any given week, I think you're going to need a mobile quarterback that can create a little bit for you to get it done. So Will Howard for us is at 5. Now, at number 4, there's some recency bias baked in here. No way around it. There's a little bit of a what have you done for me lately kind of feel when it comes to this top 5. Number 4, I got Arizona State's Sam Leavitt, man. And, let's just call a spade, dude. Sam Leavitt has got some baller to him. He's got some I don't care what coverage you're in, I don't care who you got on defense to him. Like, Ryan Russillo's got this take of, you go and look at Sam Leavitt's ESPN profile picture, he's got a gold chain to him. He plays like he's got a gold chain on, man. Like, he's got that kind of swag, that kind of moxie, kind of psychopath edge to him. I like Sam Leavitt a lot, and what he did in that in that Big 12 title game, you're going to need more of that from him in the semifinals, rather, if he ends up making it there. But the point I'm trying to make here is, I think Sam Leavitt, without his best receiver, still went out there and made plays with his legs, was able to give one-on-one shots to his guy Xavier Giller on the perimeter. I think you're going to need that from him now, like I mentioned in the college football playoff, because when you talk about teams they're going to line it up against, going back to defensive line play, Cam Scadaboo, obviously the heart and soul of your offense. You're going to play defenses now that will stack the box and try to take him away. I'd be wildly surprised if you saw teams line it up with a 3-3-5 set against Arizona State, which, for those of y'all at home, that's 3 linebackers, 3 defensive linemen. Not nearly enough to stop Cam Scadaboo. So going back to what I just said, to get to the semis, you're going to have to beat a Texas or a Clemson, more likely than not, or just by how the bracket's shaped up. To get that done, you're going to have to ask Sam Leavitt to do what he did in the Big 12 title game, all right? I love the mobility. I love the arm talent. I'm excited to watch what he does here going forward because that dude's a baller. And looks like he has a screw loose just enough to where I think he could be a difference maker for you. Put him on the field for 4 quarters. Now, this is a guy that I don't know that we would have had at 3 before last week. Drew Aller is surging, man. Drew Aller, the way that I look at him, he is willing Penn State into having a passing attack. Their best offensive player is Tyler Warren. The backfield looked great against Oregon, no way around it. But you watch Drew Aller out there, who is helping him on the perimeter? Who is the receiver you look at and say, that dude scares me, got to give him extra coverage? You say that about Tyler Warren, you don't say that about anybody else. And so the fact that Drew Aller was able to have the game he had against Oregon and to keep them in it and to score 37 points, that to me says a lot about just overall how he's wired and his progress at Penn State under this new system, Andy Koltanecki. Yeah, it's a little bit gimmicky. Yeah, there's some quirks to it. I love the way that they threw the kitchen sink at Oregon with how they attacked them. But the one play that sticks out in my mind is it's a got-to-have a situation towards the end of the game. Penn State's driving. I want to say they're somewhere in the high red, and Drew Aller has the Oregon defensive front closing in on him. And I want to say it was a defensive lineman, maybe it was a blitzer, grabs Drew Aller's shirt. And Drew Aller, just from his base, has nothing to step into, just all arm, throws to the end zone, delivers a strike, keeps Penn State in it. Plays like that, to me, Drew Aller, honestly, he reminds me a lot of a Ben Roethlisberger. Little throwback for y'all there. Another quarterback from Pennsylvania, or played in the state of Pennsylvania, rather. You're going to need more of that from him. Obviously, it would be beneficial if you have the run game looking how it looked against Oregon. But if I got one drive to get us in the field goal range or to get us a touchdown to tie the game up, I don't know that Drew Aller isn't one of those guys that I would lean on to get it done. So Drew Aller for us is the quarterback we would trust the third most in this college football playoff field. Now at number 2, we'll get some pushback here. That's totally fine. He has done some things as of late that make you kind of squint a little bit, raise an eyebrow or two. Quinn Ewers, to me, has just been in too many big spots to not put at number 2 on this list. I understand. He didn't look how you wanted him to look against Georgia, had a couple of turnovers against A&M, but at the end of the day, man, Quinn Ewers has been in the big spot. So even though he hasn't delivered the way that you would like him to deliver, you still look back at the game against Alabama where he won that game for you in Tuscaloosa. I think that matters. You still look at the fact that he had you with a play to ultimately have a chance to beat Washington in the college football playoff a year ago. Won the Big 12 title. there's enough situations I can point to say, okay, I feel good about Quinn Ewers being the guy taking the snap because he's been there before. Like, the heart rate for him has not elevated, even in overtime against Georgia. And the Georgia game went how it went, but, like, I trust the battle scars of a Quinn Ewers when it comes to a situation now where you got to win 4 games to win the national championship. I feel good about Quinn Ewers in that spot. It's worth noting now, first round of the college football playoff, they play a quarterback in Cade Klubnik who actually beat Quinn Ewers for the state championship in the state of Texas when they were in high school. So I wonder just a little bit if there's maybe a little bit of a personal edge for him in this game. I don't know, but that'll be fun to watch. Some storyline juice there. Quinn Ewers, the quarterback, I would trust the second most. For all the flaws he's had as of late, still trust him to turn it on in the big game. Now, speaking of big games, Dillon Gabriel, man, is, I think, probably the far and away answer for the quarterback you trust the most right now in this college football playoff bracket. And you maybe wouldn't have said that early on in the year because of how long it took to get going. You have the Idaho game. You have the game against Boise State where it's a little bit too close for comfort. But, like, for all of the slow start that Dillon Gabriel had, he's right now a Heisman Trophy finalist, and he has Oregon as the number 1 team in all of college football. And the thing that I've loved from him, he has really, as of late, not tried to do too much. And not trying to do too much in Oregon's offense still gives you massive numbers. There's a reason he threw for 4 touchdowns against Penn State in this Big Ten championship. He is so under control and such a great decision maker to where if you make great decisions in Will Stein's offense, the OC at Oregon, you score points. Like, get the ball to Tez Johnson, who I've said before, I think he's Deshaun Jackson playing college football again. Get the ball to Sadiq, to Ferguson, those tight ends. Like, there's so many different ways they can attack you to where you just make the right decision, good things happen. Dillon Gabriel, to his credit now, has done a phenomenal job making the right decision. And by making the quick right decision, he's helped his offensive line. So Dillon Gabriel, he's got the skins on the wall right now. Also, you talk about the game against Ohio State as the situation where he's got the big game pedigree. When he was at Oklahoma, the win over Texas, like there's some real skins on the wall for him in the big game sense to where I feel good about him going forward as the quarterback that I trust the most in this college football playoff bracket. So to recap it here for you, a lot of guys you could put at 5 for us. Will Howard, stylistically, and the Oregon performance, last play excluded, I feel good about what he can be for Ohio State with those weapons. The quarterback I would trust the 5th most in this college football playoff bracket. At number 4, gold chain wearing, pigskin slinging, transferring from Michigan State to Arizona State, Sam Leavitt is a dude. I say this a lot about Cam Ward. Sam Leavitt has got that same kind of psychopath to him. I love it. I think that'll serve them well in the college football playoff. Drew Aller, kind of a Big Ben vibe to him. The mobility, too, from Drew Aller, we neglected to mention that. He can scoot a little bit here, and it's been a major factor for him. Also, it doesn't hurt that you got a change of pace guy and Bo Breeler right behind him that can, I think, help him in some ways as well with what defenses have to account for. He's at 3. Quinn Ewers, say what you want about the last couple performances. He's got some big games under his belt. I think that'll serve him well when it's high-stakes time in this playoff. And then Dillon Gabriel, same deal. Such a good decision maker, been so smooth to this point in the year, and I think he's got Oregon obviously primed to make a run at this thing, with them being the number 1 seed in this college football playoff. Now, you'll notice there was a quarterback we did not include in that confidence or trust rankings, if you will, in this college football playoff bracket, and that's Carson Beck. Now, if he's healthy, maybe we put him in that top 5. As of right now, though, it's being reported the injury for the UCL for Carson Beck is giving some folks in Athens a little bit of cause for concern. It makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense because the UCL, now I'm not a doctor, never went to med school. The UCL is not something that is just like, hey, give him some Tylenol, ice it up, get him some recovery, and like you'll be good to go. Like that's a legitimate injury, especially on the throwing arm. Like the UCL, again, I don't know exactly how it all works, but I know it's your elbow. I know it's not easy to throw with. So what I will say is, as we get more information on this, there's no information of it if it's torn or if it's just damaged or strained or what. But like bottom line, it's injured, and the less information we get about this thing, quite frankly, the more concerned I start to feel, because an MRI doesn't take that long to get clarity on. So from what I can tell, there is confirmation on Carson Beck that is being, again, this is my feeling. I don't know this. There is, I would imagine, clarity internally at Georgia that is not being communicated. Now, more power to them. I wouldn't do that either if I were Georgia. I would keep my cards as close to the vest as possible. So the reality is he's got a few weeks here to get right before Georgia plays in the college football playoff, give or take 3 weeks before they have their first game. Now, here's my question. There's a lot of speculation as to like, okay, well, how long does it take to heal? How serious is it? And all that's totally fair to speculate. Here's my concern. Even if Carson Beck is able to play in Georgia's first college football playoff game, what percent of Carson Beck are you getting? Is it 90%? Is it 70%? Is it less than that? Like, I don't know. And the feel on this, again, not a medical expert, but like from what we know about UCL is like you probably aren't getting Carson Beck at the version of Carson Beck that you would like to have to make a college football playoff run. Like Carson Beck, in my estimation, is at his best when he's able to like drive the football down the field, able to uncork it to Arian Smith, able to hit someone over the seam, Oscar Delp, Dominic Lovett. Like, I don't know if you have that same gear if you don't have Carson Beck at the level of health that he needs to be at. So there's no way to minimize not having your quarterback at full strength. No way to do it. So if he's not able to be 100%, there's no way to like put lipstick on that pig. But here's what I would say. If I'm a Georgia fan, I watch Gunnar Stockton step into that spot against Texas, and I watch the way the offense rolled. And y'all, I'm not so sure that if I'm a Georgia fan, that wasn't a more appealing visual than what we've seen with Carson Beck at quarterback. Now, I'm not suggesting Gunnar Stockton is a better quarterback than Carson Beck, but like, I think Gunnar Stockton, with what he brings with his legs and how they double down on the run game, is almost in some ways, it feels like more complementary to who Georgia needs to be in this college football playoff. Because I'm looking at the weapons for Georgia, and like they could absolutely have a situation where they elevate in the playoff and they get the right matchups and the light bulb comes on. It's totally a fair question, but like I think they're like the team that leads the country in drops right now, if not darn near, in that top category. Like, who is the guy on the perimeter where I'm like, hey, we need to get him the football, otherwise we lose the game? I don't think it's Arian Smith. I don't know if it's Dominic Lovett. I'd love if they were able to be those guys, but like right now, what I see is the guys that need to see the football is your backfield and your tight ends. And the Gunnar Stockton experience, I think there's absolutely a way, if I'm Mike Bobo, to dial up a run-heavy kind of offense that leans on our offensive line, that leans on Tate Ratledge, that leans on ETN and Frazier, and you hope those guys are at, max capacity when it's time to get rolling and play playoff football. But like, I think there's a version of this Georgia offense that maybe leans more into who Georgia needs to be, again, to make a college football playoff run. Because as much as the physicality of the offense is a massive factor in who they would need to be with Gunnar Stockton behind center, why did Georgia have those big wins over Texas? What was the secret ingredient? It wasn't the offense. I mean, the offense did their part, but it wasn't the offense. It was the defensive line, right? I mean, I think Georgia had somewhere in the neighborhood between 2 games, like 13 sacks against Texas. And that's a good offensive line in Texas. So the way that you maximize your defense is what? Not putting them in tough situations. Shortening the game. Punting it away. Now you have a different punter as well, which is a whole other factor that we can talk about another time. But like the point I'm trying to make here is I think that with who Georgia is in this college football playoff run they could go on here, winning 3 games, being national champs, I think Gunnar Stockton, I can squint and see a version of him in this offense being exactly who Georgia needs to be to go win a national championship. Also, the mobile element, you have that with a Gunnar Stockton. You don't have that with a Carson Beck necessarily. Not to dunk on Carson Beck and his mobility, but like you have more of that with a Gunnar Stockton behind center. Just full transparency. So you take all those factors and those variables and you pair it with the idea that you look at Georgia and their side of the bracket. Like, this is another issue with like the whole seeding situation. There is one side of this bracket you do not want to be on, and Georgia is on the side of the bracket you do want to be on. Like Georgia, in their first game, will play the winner of Notre Dame or Indiana, which, again, Notre Dame would scare me more from a talent perspective, but still, Georgia will have the talent advantage. And then you play either SMU, Boise State, or Penn State. Penn State scares you the most. Again, I think Georgia's more talented than all those teams. So if I'm looking at this side of the bracket, Georgia should be that team that comes out and plays for a national championship, regardless of who's at quarterback. The way that Georgia wouldn't play for a national championship, in my estimation, is they have a situation where they make a lot of mistakes. And again, I don't want to minimize losing your starting quarterback if that ends up being the case for Georgia. But Carson Beck wasn't exactly lighting the world on fire this year for Georgia. Now, he brought him back at some key points. 100% brought you back in the Alabama game. I think he's a big reason why you won the Georgia Tech game. There's no way around that. But, like, if you were to take a total picture of what Carson Beck has been this year, put a grade to it. B minus. Like 28 touchdowns and 12 picks doesn't exactly scream winning football to me when it comes to this college football playoff. You have a couple of picks against Penn State or a couple of picks against a Notre Dame, like I think they'd make you pay. And so the game control that I think is available here for Gunnar Stockton and for Georgia, I like the idea of that. Again, it's all in principle. I'm not saying they're better with Gunnar Stockton, but I am saying it might be more of what you need to do what you got to do in this college football playoff. It might be gritty. It might be kind of ugly. It might be kind of nasty. Y'all, I think that's kind of who Kirby Smart wants to be, if we're just going to keep it a buck here. I think that's kind of Kirby Smart's MO. Last thing I'll say on this, it's tough to rely on this as a thing that will be consistent throughout the course of the college football playoff. But Gunnar Stockton goes in the game for Georgia, and it felt like a very real sense of urgency was there for the Dogs. Like it felt like everyone was like, oh, shoot, okay, our QB1 is down. We all got to do a little bit more. We all got to be on our P's and Q's a little bit more than we even were before. We've seen Georgia with sense of urgency be borderline unstoppable, in my opinion. Like the Alabama game, second half comes to mind. Obviously, that was a very Carson Beck-driven approach. The game against Tennessee comes to mind. Georgia having more urgency behind a backup quarterback, again, may in fact be one of those key ingredients that allows them to be successful in this college football playoff. So do not hear me incorrectly. I'm not saying Carson Beck not being your guy for this playoff or not being healthy for this playoff is any way, shape, or form a good thing. But I do think there is some avenues and some paths you could see here for Georgia if it is the Gunnar Stockton experience to where Georgia could still be, I think, as dangerous in different ways and could be a very, very difficult out if they do go with 14. Now, one more thing I'll say. I keep saying one more thing I'll say, but I got one more thing I'll say. The interception at the end of the game there, I'm going to go ahead and chalk up to not having the experience with that unit necessarily from Gunnar Stockton, not having the big game experience exactly. If he is your guy, you call the offense, if I'm Mike Bobo, to protect him. From a decision-making standpoint, from a down and distance standpoint, like we are not opening it up. We are not throwing the ball downfield. We are calling the Gunnar Stockton friendly, Gunnar Stockton protection approach here to allow our team to be successful. And again, I think that could ultimately be defensive-led and could be the way that Georgia ends up being really, really nasty in this college football playoff run. So I can't wait to see it, man. Cannot wait to see it again. We hope and pray that Carson Beck is ready to roll, and we're going to obviously talk about that more as we get more and more information. So the transfer portal, I mentioned, it's buzzing. It's going crazy right now. We gave you our portal predictions for a lot of these quarterbacks already. I just want us to touch on a couple of other big names that are in there or either going to be in there. Again, follow Pete Nakos on Twitter. Follow the On3 portal account on Twitter. Follow the On3 main account on Twitter. Just like all the socials, I promise you, On3's got you taken care of. So go follow anything and everything in that sector. But just to kind of round out some of these notes on the portal, Eric Singleton, receiver from Georgia Tech, he's in the transfer portal. I tweeted it out yesterday. Like if transfer portal Monday is the equivalent of like college football Black Friday, this guy is like the television in the parking lot I'm fighting over. He's an absolute dude. He's already got visits lined up with Ole Miss, Georgia, and Auburn, it sounds like. 56 receptions, over 700 yards for 13.5 yards a catch for Georgia Tech last year. Dude's a weapon. He's going to be a baller for somebody in the SEC. If I'm Georgia, man, I am doing everything in my power to bring him to Athens. Because I just spoke about what you don't have on the perimeter. If you added Eric Singleton into that roster right now, that changes your entire approach offensively, much less what you could do. So I'm excited to see where he ends up. That's a big, big fish in the portal right now. Eric Singleton, probably best to keep the phone on, my guy. Probably best to field some of those calls. Staying in the wide receiver category, Jonte Cook, former big-time recruit, was at Texas, since is going into the portal. 2 early schools to watch per Pete Nakos and Steve Wiltfong, Texas A&M and Oregon. It would be just like Oregon winning it to go out and land a Jonte Cook and add another just baller to that wide receiver room. There's a track record there of wide receivers adding into that offense, putting up big numbers, having success. That'd be attractive to me. If I'm Texas A&M, he might mean even more to me to land just by nature of what I would hope we could do for a Marcel Reed to make our offense even more dynamic. Texas A&M offensively is always going to be tough with Mike Elko running the show. They're going to have a run game. They're going to have an offensive line that's going to try and maul you. But if they can add some missile launchers, some missile catchers, I guess, like a Jonte Cook to that offense, that would excite me if I'm an A&M fan. So keep an eye on that for those 2 programs as of right now. Devin Brown, Ohio State quarterback, is hitting the portal. And this is a guy, man, like a lot of times these guys hit the portal and you're like, they ran at the first sign of resistance. That's not Devin Brown. Devin Brown fought tooth and nail for that job on multiple occasions, ended up not being the guy on the 2 times that he went toe-to-toe for that job. Didn't happen that way. Like, good for him. I'm excited to see where he ends up. He has more than earned the right to go play somewhere else. That's not a guy that ran from anything, and I appreciate the heck out of that for Devin Brown. Just because you're not the guy at Ohio State with how stacked that quarterback room is every single year doesn't mean you can't spin it. So Devin Brown, I'm excited to see where he ends up. Malik Murphy, he's hitting the portal. He was at Texas a year ago. He was at Duke this past season. Pretty good year at Duke. I mean, almost 3,000 yards, 26 touchdowns, 12 picks. That's a guy that I'm very curious to see where he ends up. A little bit, quite frankly, surprised that he ended up in the portal because Duke had the success they had, because he had the success he had. Malik Murphy, I think he's someone that will have his services sought after, to say the least. So he's in the portal. That's kind of a noteworthy entry there. Very excited to see what his market is and what schools are in the mix. Kendrick Law, receiver from Alabama, he's in the portal. He's a guy that preseason, when you would go check the Bama online message boards or Alabama On 3 site, or you would hear Kalen DeBoer talk about guys that are making some noise in spring practice or during fall camp, Kendrick Law was a name that kept coming up. Dude is just physically a specimen. I mean, ridiculously strong, super twitchy. I think he could be a guy that pops should he see the right amount of touches. Part of this, I think, for him not having the success he wanted to have at Alabama, it's no fault of Jalen Milroe, but like that offense was most successful when he was toting the rock. Like when he was doing something with his legs, when Alabama was able to have a ton of success. So I think for Kendrick Law, he goes somewhere where maybe they throw the football a little bit more. He's more of a focal point of the offense. I would not be shocked in the slightest if he had a massive year next year, wherever he ended up at. I don't think that's a situation where Kendrick Law has to go down a level to have the success that he wants to have. Before we got on the air here, former 5-star plus guy, Williams Nwaneri, an edge at Missouri this past year. From the 2024 class, he is going to hit the portal. Him and Keyshawn Silver, Kentucky defensive lineman, also in the portal. I mentioned them together because we've seen now defensive linemen, whether you be an edge or an interior guy, they are like gold in the portal. There is not a lot of big human beings that you can add to your roster with proven production in the SEC, like a Keyshawn Silver, that can have an instant impact for you. I think those are kind of the missing pieces kind of guys, if you will, that can make a massive impact for you. Keyshawn Silver, 6'4", 336 pounds. I mean, both him and Nwaneri will be massively sought after. Per On Three's Pete Nakos, Florida, Miami, Michigan, and USC, all in the Keyshawn Silver sweepstakes as it stands right now. So we'll do this every show, kind of give you our spark notes for what's going on in the portal. A lot of names I'm sure will continue to file in there. Again, keep it locked right here on the On3 YouTube channel and on the On3 socials to stay up with all things portal throughout the portal madness. All right? A couple of big names in there. But again, Eric Singleton, man, I'm excited to see where he ends up. Dude is an absolute baller. All right? Hey, a lot going on. A lot going on in your world right now as we get ready for the holidays, but we're glad that y'all choose to spend time with us to get your fix for all things college football year-round, man. Feel, again, I always say this every single show, but it's true. Feel very lucky and fortunate to do this for a job and do this with y'all dialed in. For Kane Smith on the ones and twos, for myself, JD PicKell, we love y'all. We appreciate y'all. You matter. We're going to keep this party rolling. And we'll see y'all next time.